everybody. Welcome to Design and Dialogue number 48. I'd like to have you join me in welcoming Johan Schwind, a good friend of mine and an amazing young industrial designer. We'll talk today about Johan's 10 years working professionally and all the amazing things he's done. Just so that I get it correctly, because there's quite an interesting bio here, I'm just going to read a little bit about Johan. So Johan Schwind is an industrial designer, programmer, and futurist. His passion for connecting engineering and design to human-friendly technology solutions is at the heart of what he does daily as design director for UrbanX. UrbanX is the groundbreaking BMW startup incubator here in New York City, which Johan has been working at since the beginning and also co-founded. Johan's work is extremely hands-on, driven by a passion of intelligent invention, includes everything from technical research, strategic partnerships, to hand-building robots. And we'll see some of those today. So he's worked with almost 60 cohorts at UrbanX, and he's helped launch them over the past 3 years into the future. I'd like to start by saying that, contemporary society in general believes that technology will save us all from all of our ills, let's say. At least most of us do. But for most of us, we only get a glimpse into this world through, let's say, social media on our smartphones. This is what Johan is doing every day. We're going to run this design and dialogue a little bit differently. I think I'd like to run it like a kind of master class from the future, which means Johan will be helping us try to understand what he's talking about and how all of this new technology has become much more accessible today. So he'll be typing directly into the chat, sharing links, sharing various references, etc., to keep us all sort of on track with things that are going on in his world. Of course, as always, please ask your questions in the chat as well, and we'll collect those for the end. So please join me in welcoming Johan Schwind to Design and Dialogue. All right.
Great, thank you so much, Stephen. And hey everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited for this design dialogue today.
Thanks for joining us. Where are you calling in from?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York, in Fort Greene.
Okay, okay. And this is where you've sort of been working as well? This is your home office?
This is my home office. This has been my home office for the last four and a half months or so.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So how is that looking for you guys? Do you think you'll be going back into an office anytime soon, or?
I'm not sure. We've been looking at office spaces, and we have a relatively small team, so I think it would be possible for us to go back. But we also want to be cognizant of the fact that a lot of our startups are in different parts of the world, and we don't want to force anyone to travel in the current situation and the current circumstances. So we've kind of turned our whole program into a virtual program. And that has been working really well. I was a little bit opposed to that because I build prototypes every day. We've been working in the lab multiple days a week with the startups. And I thought, well, this is hard to replicate. How do we do this when everybody's sort of distributed and working from home? But we've kind of explored this new model and found a lot of workarounds in, doing hardware in a distributed way. Where multiple teams build the same version of a product, but in different locations. And then we're all looking at the same thing over Zoom or, sharing over Slack. And it's been working really well. And it almost feels like every startup gets a little bit more attention because now everyone is virtual.
Right, right. It's a little bit scary that it's working so well, right?
It is. Sometimes you think, well, why even go back to the office at all?
Yeah, yeah.
But there's obviously a lot of kind of interaction that happens that is kind of impossible in the virtual world, where you bump into people and you have these impromptu conversations. And You come up with ideas just by, working on different things, but being in close proximity.
Mm.
And I think that's really where the virtual environment is lacking a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
that's certainly something we're looking to get back to.
yeah. Well, before we get into Urban X, we'd like to start at the beginning. Johan, you've had such an extraordinary career, the kind of career that design tech geeks around the world would be envious of, for sure. in only 10 years. I believe you were born in Canada, but grew up in Germany. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I was born in Toronto. And I had the privilege to grow up in Germany, on a farm, very isolated environment. I got as a child growing up, I got to be outdoors almost every day in the year, not having
Maybe
to
we should
worry about
start the
anything.
slideshow now.
Yeah, we can jump in with the first slide.
Okay. So you grew up on a farm.
I did grow up on a farm, middle of Germany. It looked a little bit like this one. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of the original farm.
Mm-hmm.
But it looked like this. So kind of very isolated, but large enough for a couple of families to live there. So I had, neighbors, other children to play with, as I was growing up. And
right in the center of Germany, if I'm not mistaken, like near Frankfurt in a town called Fulda.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right at the geographical center of Germany. We had this, not too far away, we had this big oak tree with a stone underneath, and it said, "This is the center of Germany." And it was a unique environment because it was very isolated from the world in a sense. We didn't have television, just because my parents chose not to have it. We barely listened to the radio. And so my childhood was kind of this bubble of, growing up with nature, and growing up with a lot of kind of fascinating machines that were around the farm. And I was looking at these things as a kid, and I was always like part terrified, part kind of fascinated by them. And I think it kind of sparked or piqued this interest in me, to build my own machines and start inventing things. And my grandfather, who was trained as an agricultural engineer, got me all these kits of parts, of Legos and other things. And I kind of modeled little machines after what I saw in the field, basically, and that was that kind of led me on this path of engineering and design, if you will.
So the next slide shows this is a kind of combine, right?
Yeah. So this was one of our neighbors' combines, and this is, even at the time, this was ancient, but he believed in keeping things work as long as possible, not buying anything new unless it's absolutely necessary. And so he kept this thing running. This must be from the 50s, I think. He kept it running well into the 90s. And it was fascinating to me because, unlike most modern machines, you can see how it works just by looking at it.
Yeah.
So you can see these exposed belts and wheels, and it was fascinating for me to observe this thing, even though from a distance, because it was very loud and a lot of smoke came out of all sorts of different places. But yeah, a lot to learn from just kind of observing it.
Right. There's a kind of technological transparency here, right? With the gears, etc.
Yeah.
So the farm was a working farm, and what were you producing?
It was mostly a cattle farm, and so they were raising cattle, and then the neighboring farm was, he was growing mostly grains, and yeah, that was kind of the predominant thing. And and obviously, since it's Germany, potatoes, a lot of potatoes.
Right.
And as a child, I always got to do something when it was harvest time. Driving a tractor was usually a good task. and yeah, so I also learned a lot about agriculture, which to this day is something I'm very interested in, how we grow things.
Yeah, and actually
And
you're working on some projects
yep.
through UrbanX that have some relationship to agriculture today. So it was really these early encounters with the machines, your interest in design, your interest in engineering.
Yep.
So how did you end up studying design?
So I had this conundrum almost, because I was always interested in engineering and inventing and building things, but I was also very interested in arts. And so I growing up, I did a lot of photography. I really loved painting and drawing, and I did this throughout high school. And I felt like I had a natural talent for art, and a lot of my teachers felt the same way. And so I was like, well, if I go to engineering school, which is usually what you do in Germany, if you're interested in technology, then I miss this whole part of me, right? It kind of almost goes to waste, because there's not really space for art in, a German engineering curriculum. And so I was looking very long and very hard. I was considering an education in fine art, but it felt like that was missing the whole part of technology, until I finally found this really amazing program in Austria, at the FAU Neum, which is based in Graz, that was called Industrial Design. It was a fairly new program, started by a professor who did architecture. And he saw this kind of
It's called,
disconnect.
excuse me, Johan, sorry, it's called the FH Yoneum, is that right?
Yeah, I can post it in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, and he saw this disconnect between technology and the creative world, and he created this program in that spirit, where he said, well, we need creative education, and we need technology to happen in the same space. And this is the space. This was our studio, where we went for 4 years, for a 4-year program. And it was, I went there for the first time when I was like 17 years old, just to look around, and I was so blown away by the fact that you can have these amazing drawings and illustrations of cars, and and products, and all sorts of things, and then in the same space you're also building these things, and you're understanding how they work. And so
what's so interesting for me when I look at this picture is that there are no computers. I mean, okay,
yeah.
there's one on a laptop over here to the right, but in today's design schools, right, the desks are just
Right.
covered with computers, as if everything is supposed to happen through the computer, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. And so this was fascinating and unique, because a lot of it was model making and working with our hands, frankly.
So
We
give
had
us
it.
give us a sense of the time here. What year would this have been? Because I think you were going to school during the recession, if that's correct, right?
Yeah, so this was 2007 when I started.
Mm-hmm.
And it was right like the year leading up to the financial crisis, which also impacted Europe
Mm-hmm.
pretty deeply.
So how
And
did that affect you guys looking for work, et cetera?
yeah, I mean, it really affected us, because I saw, people graduating from the program, and they would, go and work in bars, and, do all sorts of other things. And it kind of freaked me out a little bit, because, this was a very hard program. We, worked nights and weekends, pretty much throughout all the 4 years.
Yeah.
And it was stressful. And I thought, well, am I doing all of this to end up, working in a job that I didn't go to school for?
Yeah.
Because I really wanted to do design. And so, we all started to look at, well, what is the industry that we can go and work for that is not going to be, so deeply affected by this crisis. And it turned out the automotive industry was doing fairly well through all of this.
Right.
And obviously there's a
Especially in
strong,
Germany, I suppose.
yeah, and there's a strong, part of that industry in Germany. And so we all started to, and we were a class of 16, so a very small class, but we kind of all started to study in that direction. The program wasn't specifically automotive, but we all made it so for ourselves, basically. Learning all the tools required, to work in the automotive industry, special design tools, special software, and then obviously just practicing automotive design drawing for like hundreds and thousands of hours, because it's a very competitive space. I mean, it's an attractive industry, and obviously a lot of people want to work in it. And
it's
so
funny that you graduating right after the recession is not unlike what the crisis that students today are going through, right?
Yeah.
Wondering where they'll find a job, wondering how they'll work, what fields they'll work in, etc. So I think it's very interesting. And this is you're probably the first generation to be going to school with a kind of social consciousness as well.
Yeah, and that was a big part of the curriculum too. The head of the program really believed in this idea that design should have an impact on the world, that we are learning these skills to improve things for the better, both in terms of sustainability, obviously in the context of climate change, but also for social justice and more equality. And those goals are, I mean, it's great to have that as part of the curriculum, but it clashes when you start working
Right.
in the professional world, obviously, and we can talk about that in a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, we'll just go to the next slide there.
Yeah, so I can say a little bit about the transition into the automotive industry, which.
So first, tell us what we're looking at here, because this
Yeah,
is
so
quite quite a change from student life to professional life. So what is the scene here?
So
It's
this
really
was the
beautiful.
secret design studio of Audi, that was founded in the late 80s by Walter de Silva, who was for a long time the head of design for VW Group. And this was built into what used to be a car repair shop in the center of Munich. And it was an incredible playground for any young designer, for any designer really. And you can kind of see here, this was all focused around automotive design and concept cars specifically. So vehicles that would kind of hint at what the design direction is for the brand over the next 5 to 10 years. And then you can see this incredible collection of model cars kind of in the background. And some of the most talented designers in the industry were working there at the time. It was a very unique space, and we all knew about this place, but nobody dared even apply to it because it was so up there that it was inconceivable that you could get in. And I also didn't think of applying until one of my mentors in college told me to send a portfolio. He said, like, I think you should apply. I think you have a good shot. And so I applied, and 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from the head of the studio, and he's like, well, we got your portfolio. Do you want to start for an internship? And I couldn't believe it, but I took the internship, of course, and that's what got me started at Audi and in this unique studio environment.
And so
And
you're working here, you're immediately thrown into car design, into kind of the future of automotive, huh?
yeah, that's right. And we can just keep going through the slides. There's a few more. So this gives you an idea of the model making area, and this was where a lot of real size design models of the car were made. So again, a space where a lot of hands-on work happened, which to me was super exciting. A lot of extremely skilled craftsmen in there, a lot of extremely skilled model makers, where I was able to learn a lot just from observing their work.
And this is nearly 10 or 11 years ago, right?
Yeah, this was in 2009. And then I went back to school to finish my my program and to get my degree. And in the last weeks of my program, I got a call from them again, and they asked, well, do you want to work here as a designer, because we're growing out the product team. And so I took a job before I had a degree. I didn't even know if that was legal or not, but it felt like the right thing to do, and it got me to continue working for Audi for a while.
Fantastic.
And so we can move
Tell us
to
a little bit about this image here, though, Johan, because I happen to have visited Ingolstadt years ago, which was the Audi headquarters, and I was wondering if Akim Badstubner had been in the studio with you at any time, and
he was leading the studio for a brief period of time while I was there, and so this is what you see in this picture is called a clay model. It's a real size model of a car that's made out of clay-like material, and it's a fascinating process because it's the perfect kind of combination of human and machine working towards a common goal. So you can see these CNC machines in the background, these columns. And so the left side of the car, or the center section of the car, you can kind of see these lines. And so this was machined by a CNC to give kind of a rough shape. And then on the left, where the people are working, and especially around the headlight area, this was finished by a professional clay modeler.
They're actually shaping the car by hand, right?
They're shaping it by hand, and it's a really important part of the design process because even with all the CAD tools and the software that we have today, it's almost impossible to design a car that looks right in the real world, that's purely virtually.
Yeah. So I mentioned Akim because this is, it's pretty extraordinary that you were there during that time, because that was kind of the golden age of Audi design, right? Yep. So you were not only working on the next level of Audi cars, and this one is actually probably one that's on the road now, but you were also working on other consumer products, is that right?
Yeah, so they were, at the time when I joined, they were growing their product team and kind of looking to work with other like-minded brands that shared a similar design philosophy. And so one of the first brands that we worked with was Leica Camera, which is a German camera brand. And they asked us to redesign a lot of their products, and to also work on a new product, which you can see in the next slides, which was the Leica T. Which was really the first real entry for them into the digital world. They had been a film brand for most of their history, and making this transition to digital was difficult for them because it obviously meant sacrificing a lot of quality initially. And so it took them a long time to make the step, and when they did, they came to Audi and they said, well, you stand for technology, right? And we want you to help us with shaping this product. And so we designed the full hardware. You can see here, this is kind of a look at the process of milling the body. This was a unibody design, which was very new for the camera industry. And then if we go to the next slide, this was really building on Leica's strengths a lot in the sense that it was modular, and that you could use all the Leica M lenses, extremely high quality lenses on this camera, but now it was digital. And the camera itself was really almost the size of a phone. And we made it very flat, we made it very slim, almost to disappear. And it's really all about the lens, which is where all the quality comes in.
But that kind of more massive body actually makes it feels like there's definitely something that's been attributed by Audi, right, to this.
Right.
So that solid piece of machined aluminum, Audi was doing aluminum frames, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, aluminum is a big material for Audi, and they pioneered a lot of processes and techniques in working with aluminum. But also from a design language perspective, their designs are very monolithic. And this is something we transferred to this camera, kind of getting rid of any part lines and unnecessary, detail or things that would look like they're just there because that was, the easiest engineering solution. We really spent a lot of time simplifying this and highlighting the things that are essential, which again is, here you can see these manual dials. That's really important for Leica to have that tactile control. And obviously the lens, which is the most important part of the camera. And we can go to the next slide, and this was a lot of my work is thinking through what a user interface looks like for a Leica camera. This was the first camera that needed a user interface designed from scratch. And we wanted to make it very modular because we realized that everyone has their own style of photography and their own style of working with the camera. So different controls are of different importance for different photographers.
Sure.
And we wanted to reflect this in this design. And so you have these tiles that can be rearranged, and you can make your own interface for this camera based on that.
We should also mention that you yourself are a photographer.
I am.
And those are Johan's photographs over his shoulder there. So I'm wondering if this corresponded with you going deeper into photography in a more professional sense, or where were you at in your own photographic journey when you were designing this camera?
I was somewhere at the beginning, I would say, and it certainly inspired me to learn more and go much deeper in photography, just because Leica they have such a kind of history of photography, and once you get into it and look at all the incredible photographers that have used Leica cameras.
Sure.
And the art and the pictures that they've produced, it opens up a whole world, and I was fascinated by it, and it drove me deeper into photography. I never purchased a Leica camera, and we didn't get any for free during this project, but it certainly helped me look at photography through a new lens, if you will.
Yeah. So then you kind of head into completely different territory with this product here. What are we looking at?
And this was interesting because we were kind of operating as an agency, so we got to see a lot of different clients and a lot of different projects. And as a young designer, this was a great environment because I got to work on a whole range of different things, and every new thing kind of required doing research, understanding the challenges, and finding a new solution. And so this was the early days of electric vehicles for Audi, and we did a whole project designing all sorts of different charging stations, and it also started the thought process of design in public space. Because the charging station obviously is something that usually goes somewhere in public.
Yeah, sure. You're not just thinking about the car as a product, but then how does the car interact with the city, right?
Exactly. And then if we move to the next slide, there was also a challenge with that in the sense that we were working for a lot of luxury brands and doing a lot of super luxury products. This is a carbon fiber ski.
That actually Audi branded skis?
They're Audi branded, and they were made in collaboration with Head, which is an Austrian ski company. And I think they retailed for maybe 15,000 euros at the time.
Wow.
And while these things are interesting to work on as a designer, especially as a young designer, it kind of got me to ask myself if I'm still true to what I did or what I was taught in college, which is that you really need to have an impact with what you're doing. And here we're spending a lot of time designing something for the 0.1% maybe.
Sure.
And not really having an impact. And so that was eating away at me a little bit over time. And I was looking for ways to do that differently and to work on things that can make a change, at least at some level.
So this I believe you went to India at this point. What took you to India, and how did you shift from design in a studio for luxury goods to traveling to India and working on a social project?
Yeah, this was really a coincidence. There was a group at Audi at the time called Social Innovation. really just a handful of people who felt the same way as I did, but in a completely different part of the company.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we have all this great talent in the company and we have all this amazing technology. Can't we use that to do something good in the world? And to, maybe help other companies succeed in doing something good. And they did a long search around the globe, really, for companies that would be a good fit for a partnership with Audi, where Audi could provide a lot of technology expertise to support a good cause. And they found this company in India called Sarvajal. I'll put a link in the chat, which was really on a mission to bring clean drinking water to large parts of India that were, cut off from any like public water supplies.
Mm-hmm. I
And
believe
so,
only 1 in 10 has access to clean drinking water in India. Is that correct?
yeah, that's kind of a WHO statistic. 1 in 10 people have access to clean drinking water. And it disproportionately affects obviously people in the lower levels of society that have less income, that live in kind of makeshift neighborhoods and environments.
So was this the social innovation group? Was this purely about doing good, or was it also about kind of exploring the new market for a company like Audi?
I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, there was certainly an idea that we could productize some of the technology that was used in cars,
Right.
In a way where it was more useful for a mass market and could be plugged into some of these projects.
Right.
But they really thought that the knowledge transfer was what was valuable here, and so they approached our studio, the design studio, and asked, well, do you have any people who could work on something like this? Because the company said they need engineers and they need designers. So we're here looking for designers. And I just jumped on this project. I was like, this is fantastic. This is exactly what I was looking for. And I spent a couple of months doing work in the studio, working on this, coming up with a proposal that we then presented to the CEO of this company. And they were blown away, and they said, well, this is fantastic. How about we get you to India and you work on this on the ground with the rest of the team?
And on a personal level, your mom is German, but your dad is Indian, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So was this the first time you were going back to India?
This was the first time ever going to India for me. We'd never taken any vacations, any trips to India. And my dad's relationship with India was a little bit torn. They left India when he was very little, and he never looked back really. But for me, it was always there as a part of kind of my family's history. And I was very curious to explore. And I came to India for the first time with maybe all the typical stereotypes of India and very little knowledge of what it's actually like. And I was amazed by it, to be honest. It was so much more than I would have expected on so many different levels.
Yeah.
Such an interesting kind of weave of culture and diversity and different religions, different kind of ideologies, and all very, very different than I thought it would be. And I remember going to India. I found this incredible train system that for a few dollars you can get on a train. It takes you anywhere in India. I thought that was fantastic, and it's a great way to travel. And I did that for a while, actually.
I rode a train from Calcutta to Bhagalpur. I'm not exactly sure where that is, but I know I know that it's a bit on the Silk Road. And we went on a textile project, but we were on the train for 9 hours. And I remember when the train left the station, literally everyone in the train station climbed on to the sides of the train. And
Yeah.
so there were hundreds of people just clinging physically to the outside of the train, crawling in the windows and everything. So as the train pulled away, so by the time we got to our cabin, it was completely full of
Yeah.
people who
It's an adventure to be on a train.
absolutely. So was this your first time working in the quote unquote majority world?
Yeah, yeah, it was, and it was an incredible kind of journey because we first day we kind of went into a community outside of New Delhi, and there's a lot of them in India where it's really kind of makeshift. You know, people building their own structures, um, building their own infrastructure, really, because the government is not providing that for them. And so we really went in there and we wanted to learn firsthand how people get access to water in
Right.
these communities. And you could see on some of the pictures that were shown that they line up at 5 a.m. Sometimes the whole family with canisters and buckets, and they wait sometimes more than half a day for a truck to arrive to bring them water. And it not only is that just like a time burden and a stressful thing and anxiety because you don't know if it actually arrives. It also prevents them from going to school, pursuing a career.
And in this image here, is this an early prototype or is this what the company was already making?
Yeah, so they were making this thing, and that for them that was a prototype. But the challenge that they had was if you put this somewhere outdoors in any of these communities, it'll be gone by tomorrow.
Right.
And not because people like to vandalize, just because they don't have anything. And so, the solar panel that's on top, or the tank that's inside, that's something that would use for their house. And so we needed to make something that could withstand that, and that would stand the test of time. And that's where the whole process started for us.
So in the next image, we see your concept, correct?
Yeah, so that was kind of what we came up with. Is we did a lot of studies around, well, what would be a good design that's attractive, that looks modern and clean and inspires confidence in the quality of water, but at the same time was something that we can make on the ground and with the tools and processes that are available. And so this is concrete rings with a bunch of sheet metal parts, and it's very inexpensive to make. Costs about $500 to make this whole thing, and it's very robust. It's impossible to dismantle this thing once it's been set up.
And we have some images of you developing the prototype in India. How many times did you travel to India?
So I was there about 4 different trips, and each trip we kind of moved it along a little bit. And this was kind of the first trip, and it was a fascinating insight for me as a designer, because we got there and we said, well, we want to build a prototype, but the only material that we could find anywhere was this corrugated cardboard and a bunch of tape and other things. I think we went to like an art supply store or something. And so, not the right materials to build a prototype, but we said, well, let's do it anyway and see what happens. And so we made this whole thing, and it was fascinating to see how it brought everyone on the team together, in the sense that now people were, talking about very concrete ideas on, how to improve this, what else could be done. And it inspired everyone to do all the next steps, because when I got there initially, the project was a little bit slow. Like nobody was really sure, well, do we want to do this? Is this the right direction? What are the next steps? And we put together this really bad cardboard prototype, and all of a sudden everyone was like, wow, this is great. This looks like something that we could actually put somewhere, and people would be able to get water from it. And people started drawing on it.
Just a full-scale prototype in paper, right, can express the idea well enough for people to get the point and move on, begin to develop the real materials. So here you're working in concrete and sheet metal.
Yeah, so this was the day after or 2 days after, where we finally got some concrete rings. We were sourced from like a construction yard. We got some sheet metal, and the processes were very kind of archaic. We were working with a chisel and a hammer, and like the prototype wasn't very good either. But it got us to the next step, and then we learned about making our own molds for concrete rings. I learned a lot about working with concrete, and we put together, I think, 4 or 5 more iterations of this, every single iteration getting a little bit better. And we finally arrived at this, which is the current product that they
How many liters
are
of
working
water is
with.
this holding, Johan?
So there's 2 versions, one with 500 and one with 750. So this is for how they distribute these. This is about a day worth of water. And then they have little service crews that come with a small vehicle, and refill these overnight. The unique thing here is really because the vehicle is still there, the tanker is still there, but the fact that there's a machine where you can go whenever you like, and you swipe a card and you and you get water, that frees up your whole day basically, right? Because it's there and you can go whenever it's convenient.
This is awkward. I have to answer the phone. Just give me 1 second.
It's okay. No problem.
I'm in a cabin in Maine and someone's calling. Okay, I think we're okay. No, what's really fantastic about that project is that you're not only involved in the grassroots development of what is essentially a water vending machine, right? But then you also understand its direct connection to the city, and its relationship to a network. And I think that obviously these are aspects that you're working on every day at UrbanX. So where did you go from here?
So this was really the project that completely changed my mind about what design can be. And because here I saw firsthand that you can do design in its classic sense, and you can have an impact and you can do something good. And I felt like I couldn't go back to doing what I was doing, and I had to find a new role where I could do more of that. And so I transitioned to BMW, which at the time was doing starting a similar project with some of the same people that I worked with before. And it was all about social innovation, as we called it. And I started working there as a strategist, not as a designer, and that was a big shift because I went from making designs to making PowerPoint presentations. Luckily, I got the opportunity to work on EV charging for BMW a couple of months into this job. And
EV,
so
electric vehicle charging.
Electric vehicle charging, and specifically for cities, which was great because that was something I was more and more interested in. So we developed the system that you can see here, which is a charger that goes on a lamppost. We designed the lamppost and the light itself too, as something that would be more energy efficient. And I ended up traveling around Europe selling this to municipalities. So I got kind of a good firsthand view at the process of working with cities, which is frankly very difficult. It's not and for good reasons too. We often say, well, cities are slow and they're not making enough changes, but they also need to act in the interest of everyone. And so they have to carefully examine these projects. But it helped me learn about this, and it's something that we later applied at UrbanX, where we said, well, we can actually help startups navigate this environment, and that's value that we can provide.
Give us a sense of the automotive landscape at this time, because this must have been what, 2012?
Yeah, that was 2012, 2013.
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, this is a moment when the car companies are beginning to scramble, right? The BMW's trying to sell an electric vehicle.
Yep.
Tesla is just I don't know, starting up? Was Tesla even around in 2013?
They were around, but nobody in Germany took them seriously. And
Right,
in
right,
hindsight, they maybe should have.
right, right. So this is quite an interesting moment where car companies are beginning to look at what else they can do,
Yep,
and what role the car will play, or the car industry will play in the future, especially the future of cities.
exactly.
So you were now working in strategy at BMW, and BMW was thinking about one of its fairly recent acquisitions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the Mini project. What
Yeah.
year did BMW acquire Mini?
That must have been in 2000, 2001. And that's
Mm-hmm.
when they relaunched the brand, and they relaunched the entire product portfolio. So it went from, the little car that you see on the left, which was the original Mini, to something a little bit bigger, which honestly, you can think of it what you will, but the times have also changed. So, making a car that's safe for people just required it to be bigger.
Yeah.
And so they relaunched that, and but by the time I was there, it was already 2014, 2015. So they felt like it had to change directions, right? The world had changed quite dramatically in those 15 years. And they didn't really know where to go, but they figured they could ask us because we were working on, sustainability and innovation and all of those good things. And so the board approached, our group, and they said, well, here's a question: if Mini was your company, if you owned Mini, what would you do with it?
Right.
And we assembled a team of people from our network who, were forward thinking, and, in culture and arts and technology, in all these different fields. And we started thinking about that, and we came up with some wild ideas that we were quite certain that they would never go with, or, shoot down in the first presentation. But to our surprise, they actually went with a lot of it. And
Some of those ideas were things like Urban X and
yep. So
and
one of them was Urban X, which we said, well, the city, which is our home, the home of a product, is changing dramatically, and we have no clue what's going on. So we need to find that out, and we thought, who better to find out from than the people working on innovation in cities, which, to us, were startups trying to solve some of these emerging challenges that we saw in cities. And we wanted to give them a platform, and we wanted to do that in an authentic way, where we said, well, let's build a program for startups where we can support them with technology, and with design and the things that we do well and that we know a lot about, and let them help us understand, from their expertise, what cities really need and how we need to shape these new solutions.
yeah. And one of your other ideas was ADO, correct?
Yep. And ADO was really a center for design and for thinking about the future of design, which we said Mini is so deeply connected to design. The original Mini was kind of born out of what we would now call design thinking, really putting people at the center of the development of that product. And so we started ADO, which is, you can see in this building, and co-located UrbanX with ADO to run our program.
Excellent, excellent. So it's super interesting because this is where I spent a year as a designer in residence, the first designer in residence at ADO, and that's where our paths first crossed, Johan. So you at UrbanX, your role is pretty broad as design director, not only in kind of helping select the cohorts, but then helping them grow as companies. So give us a sense, if we go back to the previous slide, give us a sense of how you spend your time with the various companies that are coming through.
So I've built a team of experts over the last 8 cohorts that we've done. And we've really, I like to think of it as the miniaturized version of, what a company like Mini would have internally. A team of engineers and designers that are very closely interlinked and working together. And, we used to work on the same table basically all day before all of this happened. And, I really like this idea of multidisciplinary collaboration around real things. And so, prototyping and building mock-ups and building designs really became a central part of that. and it's something that we did and still do a lot for the startups is making ideas tangible and figuring out how to make progress as quickly as possible.
Let's talk a little bit about a few of those examples. I know that we're running out of time, believe it or not, but
I know.
we have a lot more ground to cover, and we have some amazing prototypes that Johan's going to share with us. So here we're looking at near space labs, and this is probably one of the most exciting that I think you've worked on. But tell us here what the business case was, for example, what the innovation is, and what your personal role in it was.
Yeah, so the business case for this company was that cities, urban planners, architects, and also insurance companies and all sorts of other stakeholders in cities are heavily reliant on real-time images, satellite images of cities. But a lot of these entities don't really have access to that kind of data. And they found this unique kind of unused space in space, which is over the altitude where airplanes fly and underneath the altitude where satellites orbit. And they said the stratosphere, and the space, if you look at it, it's completely empty. And they found this baffling, and they said, well, what if we put some devices into that space? They will be so close to Earth that with a consumer camera, we can take the most amazing high resolution pictures at a fraction of the cost of what it costs to launch a satellite and operate it. And we're not interfering with air traffic, and we don't have to go through the process of putting something on a rocket. And so they started working with these balloons, and we worked with them to actually get them to one of their first successful launches, which is what these pictures are from. So we built this whole
commercial camera equipment. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we used a camera that you can buy on Amazon. It's really, it's not fancy, but that was the real innovation, is that we could hack together this thing from off-the-shelf parts, very cheap kind of consumer items. And
incredible.
We were on the phone all morning with the FAA to get clearance for launching this. And you can just do that over the phone. One of the challenges here was that it needs to be under a certain weight limit. And I think the weight limit was 12 pounds and the camera was already 8 pounds. So not a lot to play with.
So what materials are you using here?
So what you can see here is extruded polystyrene. This is kind of building insulation material. And then some carbon fiber and these styrofoam balls from like an art supply store. And the interesting thing about this landing gear that I came up with is that it later showed up in a design for a Mars lander made by NASA. So there was something to it that I think was going in the right direction. And you can see here, this is a video from the first launch taken from the device with an extra camera, looking at the camera that is taking the Earth images. And you can kind of see it in the center spinning around.
So building robots is part of, if I can call that a robot.
Yeah, totally.
It's part of what you're doing on a daily basis for these cohorts. So this is another example, but a very different one. What company is this for, Johan?
So this is a company that does inspection of sewers. And this is the interesting thing here is that we see a lot of companies that have found a business model in helping cities maintain their infrastructure, which is something that we almost never think about, but is obviously the backbone to everything that we do in the city, right? And that is, water infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure, obviously roads and highways and bridges, electrical infrastructure, all sorts of things. And so this was an exploration into a product that would allow for, the inspection of what's under the city without putting people into, a hazardous environment.
Right.
And so this is completely remote controlled and pulls this little cable with it that allows you to look into the guts of the city.
And this is a completely different kind of autonomous vehicle. This is it's farm equipment, but not. It's a kind of tractor, I believe.
This is something we're working on right now, and it's farm equipment, but the goal of this is really climate change remediation through a process called biochar. Mm-hmm. And some of you might be familiar with the concept of terra preta, which is using biochar as a soil amendment to increase the kind of performance of the soil on a farm. And so we're working on this whole system that would automatically create biochar on a farm, sequester carbon in the process, huge amounts of carbon that at the same time improve the quality of the soil.
Let's spend a little time on this one here. What scale is this image at? I mean, how big is this this kind of tractor?
So this is about 3 feet tall, 3 feet long.
Okay.
So it's a bigger robot, certainly the biggest one that we've worked on.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's actually towing the biochar converting element.
Yeah. So this is towing the actual tool that generates the char.
So what's the benefit of having an autonomous tractor at this scale, and who would this be for?
So to me, that's a really interesting question, because we are used to agricultural machines that are large and that have been getting larger over time to kind of make the process of agriculture more economically efficient. Mm-hmm. But that sacrifices a lot of approaches that would make agriculture more sustainable. And the sustainable approaches are usually the smaller scale ones that make better use of the natural form of the land. And they are not suitable for huge machines. And right. So with robots, we have this unique opportunity to build small scale machines that are not dependent on the dynamics of labor cost, that can work on the land pretty much 24/7, but do that in a much less invasive manner and kind of support small farms and support sustainable agriculture
at a much lower cost.
Yeah.
And so you're building one of these at home, aren't you?
Well, I'm building a small. I'm building. You can kind of see it over my shoulder.
Can you give us a little demonstration or show us what you're working on there?
Yeah. So this is kind of the miniature version. I don't know if you can see it. So this is the miniature version, and it looks a little bit like a toy, but it's running all the same algorithms. And it's using the same brain, if you will, as any big robot would. And we can go to the next slide. This is kind of interesting. So this is the brain of the robot, if you will. And this is interesting because it's a very high-powered processor that can run, machine learning algorithms, or AI, if you will, very efficiently. And this is something you can buy on Amazon for $100. Right? So this type of technology has completely changed the dynamics of how we think about things like robotics, where it used to be kind of exclusive to industries like the automotive industry, that had the funds to, purchase extremely costly technology. Now this has come down to a price point where this can be an educational tool. And the fact that that has happened has also created a global community of people that are writing code, that are sharing code, that are co-developing projects around this, which has created a whole new dynamic of knowledge transfer and learning, which we find really exciting.
Yeah, this is mostly how you're working at a kind of, in the beginning, at a works-like model as opposed to an actual model, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it's important for us to really jump into prototypes as quickly as we can, because that's the best, to us, that's the best way of learning.
Right, right. So we're we're already over. I can't believe it, but I would love to take some questions for Johan. There's actually a lot more that we could talk about, but maybe as we're looking at, yeah, I think this is the last project. Johan, as we gather the questions, would you like to just go over this last project, which is very interesting, and
Sure,
connect
yeah.
to your very first?
Yeah, so this is a project. This was a company called Varuna. I'll post it in the chat. They're really focused on bringing transparency to our water network in the US. Mm-hmm. And it kind of brought me full circle on the India project, because when we think of water problems, we think of countries like India. But there's actually a lot of problems around water right here in the US. And it affects disproportionately, lower income communities, minority communities. And so this company has really set out to rectify some of that situation by providing tools to especially the small municipal utilities for them to better manage their water quality, and for them to have full transparency of what's happening in the system, to make better choices around maintenance, repairs, and other measures. And so this is, again, kind of a product that lives outdoors. It's solar powered, and it's based around this little microcontroller. Again, it's very small, very inexpensive. This connects directly to the cloud through a cell network. And it takes any kind of sensor input and can read anything that already exists in the field in terms of sensors. But rather than somebody driving out there maybe once a month and looking at what the reading is, this reports it to your mobile phone, to a dashboard.
Gathering data on water quality.
It's just aggregating and giving a much more complete record of what's happening in the system, and allowing the system to be much more responsive.
Fantastic. All right, let's take a few questions here. We have one that was sent earlier, which I think related to the first project. Let me see, it's from Malika Leeper. Malika, if you're there to ask the question directly, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, hello.
Hi,
hey, we can hear you.
Hi, Johan.
Hi, how's it going?
Thank you, Stephen. My question, I had a few questions, but I'll start. The one question I had was about the dispensers, the water dispensers in India. I was curious to know where, was there a strategic location that you were choosing to site these dispensers in? And were there any unexpected outcomes that arose? And how did the community respond to the water dispensers?
Yeah, so strategically, we mostly ended up looking at schools, to be honest, co-locating them with schools, where both the children going to school could get water, they could get extra water to take home, but then the school would also be kind of taking care of the device and making sure that it remains operational. So that was something that Sarvajal ended up doing a lot. And then they predominantly looked at communities that were kind of the most underserved in terms of water infrastructure. And this was challenging because India has a functioning government and has functioning city governments, and allowing something like this kind of almost feels like admitting for them that they're not doing their jobs well. So this was something that they had to navigate very carefully, and build a lot of partnerships. And it wasn't a simple process, but I think they found a good approach that allowed them to scale across multiple cities in northern India.
It's so interesting because this is a project that I could imagine in New York as well. I mean, how few water fountains do we have that actually work?
Yeah.
So how many people would love to have fresh water at a reasonable price?
Yeah.
And I believe what was the price of water for the consumer there?
It was about ₹1 per liter.
And
so that is very low. That's like a fraction of a dollar,
wow.
a 60th of a dollar.
Okay.
For a liter of water. And to answer the second question, if we ran into any issues, I think the big issue that they ran into initially was that if you do this as an NGO, where you drop this into a neighborhood, completely sponsored, completely paid for, then there's no incentive for the neighborhood to take care of this, unfortunately. And so they said, well, if we make this, a transactional model with a small amount of money paid, then somebody can earn some money from that too. And they actually put this into the hands of, people that were already established as, having a little store or running a doctor's office or running some other business in the neighborhood. This became an income stream for them. And in turn, they would take care of it. They would call the company if anything wasn't working, and they kind of became guardians of the product. And so adding this little layer of paid actually made that possible.
Fantastic. We have another question, which is, let's see, from Sarah Abate. Sarah, are you still with us? Sarah was curious what type of cameras you're using, Johan.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Hi, I just wanted to say hello, and I wanted to thank you for using your gifts and talents to do this kind of work you're doing for the world. It's really touching. So thank you for that. And yeah, I know as a photographer, as your other passion, just, maybe what cameras, and I know you spoke a lot about lenses, just really quickly, like just a couple tips.
Yeah, so I love still photographing on film. I do that as kind of a mix of film and digital. The film camera I really love is a Mamiya RZ67. It was made in the 80s for fashion photography mostly, and it's probably one of the best medium format cameras out there. And you can buy it very cheaply from eBay Japan if you want one. There's a ton of them out there, and it's really incredible. And then the other camera that I the XT3, which is actually sitting behind me, a very contemporary kind of digital compact camera. I like the Fujis because they did a really, really good job matching the color from the CCD to the colors that they had in their film that they made for a long time and are still making. So if you're looking for great color representation, that's probably one of the best cameras out there for that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. And we had a last question, which I think is a great general one, and one that I think we can end on. What's next, Johan? What are the fields that you haven't worked in, and what would you like to explore further?
Yeah, I mean, right now, really, the field of robotics is very intriguing to me, and I've been spending a lot of time learning about software and software development and machine learning. And maybe part of it is because it's trendy, but another part of it is because I really think that this should be part of the vocabulary of a designer today. And we've left software development to engineers for a very long time. And I think it's time for designers to get involved in that process much more deeply, rather than being, at the front end, doing, user interfaces, which is important too. I think we can get much more deeply involved in thinking how digital and virtual systems work, and how digital technology shapes the world. And I think that's where, honestly, as we see it right now, that's where a lot of the designer's mindset is going to be required moving forward.
Fantastic. Hey, Johan, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a real enlightening experience, I think, for all of us, a little window into the future. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate your work. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before everyone goes, I'd like to mention that Design and Dialogue will return on Wednesday with my co-host, Glenn Adamson, speaking with Mumbai architect, Bijoy, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Jain, founder of the architectural practice studio Mumbai. So please join us on Wednesday at the same time, same place. Thank you everybody for joining us today. And thanks again, Johan. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.